Hi class. Today, our second day, we are going to be talking about genes and chromosomes, the genetic makeup of how we develop and how that impacts us. So it's a little bit of a biology, so forgive me if I get things wrong or say it wrong. This is not my area of expertise. Again, the book is going to give greater detail. I'm just going to go through the basics. All right. So human life begins very simply. There are two gametes, one from the male and one from the female, an ovum and a sperm. They join together. When they join together, they create a zygote. So the zygote is one cell created from the ovum and the sperm. The resulting combination is their genetic makeup. There are over 2 billion chemically coded messages, and each one is necessary to create a human life. So genes are a specific DNA sequence, and we get our genes from both sets of parents. Chromosomes are the rod-shaped DNA portions, and they're in 23 pairs. So 25,000 genes equals 46 chromosomes. Together, they intertwine and they create 23 pairs. Each chromosome pair, 23 of them, creates one human cell. So what happens when we have twins? A monozygote twin are twins that are created by one cell. That cell divides and creates two genetically identical beings. The ovum and the sperm meet, they create one cell. That cell splits and creates two human beings who are genetically identical. Dizygotic twins are when the sperm and the ovum meet twice, and there are two cells, meaning two children are growing, but they're not genetically identical. They did not originate from the same cell. The causes of multiple births are fertility drugs. Older moms will have twins. That's more common than younger moms having twins. And then there's a racial, ethnic, and national difference. Some races, some ethnicities tend to have twins more often than others. So establishing the sex of the child. The female body has two chromosomes that are X, both are X. The male, however, has an X and a Y. So if the father's X chromosome meets up with a female's X chromosome, it's going to be a girl baby. If the father's Y chromosome meets up with the mother's X chromosome, it will be a boy. So we have to look at the same thing when we talk about genetic issues and genetic health issues. In this slide, they're talking about the mom who does not carry a recessive gene for PKU, and the dad does not carry it. So no matter which chromosome mix-up they have, their child will not have PKU, which is a genetic disability. Now we see a picture where mom is a carrier, but dad does not have any recessive gene on it. So now we look at the combinations of those chromosomes, and what would happen is that if mom provides this chromosome with any of dad's, you're going to have two children with who could be, or the chance, 2 in 4 chance of your child being a carrier. So they won't be sick, but they'll carry it into the future. Now we look at, what if mom is a carrier and dad is a carrier? Well, then we have the same 2 in 4 chance that the child will be a carrier, but if this child receives both recessive small p's, they will have PKU. I hope this makes sense. The book explains it a little better, but you feel free to email me if you have questions about this. Again, it's not a huge deal. I just want you to understand how genetics plays a piece in our development. These are some genetically based disorders. They believe at this point these are genetically based. So we have Huntington's disease, obsessive compulsive disorder, Fragile X, which leads to developmental disabilities, early onset Alzheimer's, ADHD, alcoholism, and schizophrenia. When development of a fetus deviates, it's usually because of a genetic issue like we just talked about. Sometimes it can be because of a spontaneous mutation. Something just caused it to mutate. It's not tied to genetics. Sometimes it's tied to the health of the mom or the dad. It's unknown why that happens. And then sometimes it's due to environmental insult. Development can be altered if the environment isn't healthy for the child. Lead in the water, pollution, all of that can create changes in the fetus. So some of the disorders that can happen during development of the fetus: Down syndrome, which is genetic; Fragile X syndrome, which is a spontaneous mutation; sickle cell disease, which is genetic; Tay-Sachs disease; Klinefelter syndrome, which is genetic. So here we talk about the how the environment can impact. So we're looking at smog going into the man's lungs, which alters his sperm, which can help, that sperm will provide chromosomes to the baby, which can create a defect. So right now in our world, there is such a thing as DNA-based genetic testing. Parents can choose to have the DNA of the baby tested to see if any of these following things will occur. This is recommended for people who know they have it in their family or fear that they are a carrier for such a thing. Typically, this is done in utero prior to the baby being born. So here are some ways to monitor. Amniocentesis, done between the 15th and the 20th week of pregnancy. This is taking out amniotic fluid. Again, prior to the baby being born, it can test their DNA. Chorionic villus sampling, CVS, done at 8 to 11 weeks. So either can be done trans-abdominally or trans-cervically. And it again involves a needle going into the placenta or the amniotic sac. The ultrasound, very common thing for women to have ultrasounds to see how their children are developing. This just measures structure. It measures all of the body to make sure everything's growing the way it should be, making sure that the child is growing and that the amniotic fluid is enough. So genotypes to phenotypes. A given behavior is not caused solely by genetic factors, nor is it caused solely by environmental factors. There can be many things that impact who we are and how we develop. For instance, there can be multifactorial transmission due to weight gain. Some of it can be genetic. There can be a genetic reason that people gain weight. There can also be outside forces that cause us to gain weight. So it is not tied to just one thing. Now we're going to talk about intelligence. And we have nature versus nurture here. Possible causes of intelligence. Those who believe just in nature believe that it is a genetic factor and that the environment plays no role. Even if there is a highly enriched environment, it's not going to make a difference. You are what you are from birth. Nurture, on the other hand, on the far side, says that intelligence depends entirely on the environment. Genetics plays no role in how we develop. And then there's a variation of all. I am the person who believes, kind of right in the middle, that we have some genetic endowment, but we also learn from our environment, and that if we're given enough resources, it will enhance that genetic piece that we have. So we talked about genetic counseling. I want you to think about some of the ethical issues surrounding the idea of genetic counseling. If you were the person having that baby and you chose to do genetic counseling to find out that it has a health issue, what would you do? Would you choose to carry full term? Would you choose to abort? What would you do if you found out that the baby you were going to have had a genetic issue? So there's been a lot of research done on nature versus nurture. A lot of animal studies where they've controlled both the genetics and the environment. There have been human studies a long time ago, very unethically. They would take twins and separate them on purpose to raise them in different areas to see if genetics was stronger or nurture was stronger. They do not do that anymore, but not too long ago that was a thing. Now they do twin studies. They keep them in the same family and they see how they develop and how they grow to see what the tie-ins are. Skipping that one. Genetics and IQ. So some research has been done to show that there is a genetic overlap as far as your intelligence quotient. So this basically says that identical twins reared together are pretty much 100% accurate. They both have the same general IQ. Even identical twins reared apart will have the same IQ, which makes you think it's more genetic. Fraternal twins of the same sex, remember they do not share the same chromosomes, the same DNA, 50% similar. Different sexes, same thing. Same thing with siblings reared together, parent and child, pretty similar. Siblings reared apart. Foster parent and child, there's a 0% correlation between the intelligence quotient of a foster parent and a child. So there's a few stages of prenatal period. We're going to talk about them because I want you to see where each thing develops and how maybe any kind of mutation or trauma at that point will change the development of the embryo. So we have the germinal fertilization, which is up to 2 weeks. The germinal stage is first and shortest. That's where the cells are dividing and connecting to the wall of the uterus. After 3 days, the zygote consists of 32 cells, which doubles by the next day. It's crazy. Embryonic, 2 weeks to 8 weeks, the zygote is now designated as an embryo, so it's an embryo at 2 weeks. It develops at this point 3 layers, which ultimately form different parts of the body. The ectoderm layer will create the skin, hair, teeth, sense organs, brain, and spinal cord. Endoderm creates the digestive system, liver, pancreas, respiratory system. And the mesoderm creates muscles, bones, blood, circulatory system. So looking at this, 2 weeks to 8 weeks, some cases, mom doesn't even know she's going to have a baby. So imagine what could be happening in that 2 to 8 weeks prior to her knowledge. Could she be smoking? Could she be drinking? Could she be doing things that could hurt the development of the baby? The fetus, the fetal stage, starts at 8 weeks until birth. From 8 weeks, it's considered a fetus. And this is when major organs start to develop into the organs they're going to be. So we talked about this. We talked about that. We talked about this. This is when the brain becomes more sophisticated. 8 weeks to birth. At 8 weeks, the brain is developing. So this is what a fetus looks like 2 months after conception, 5 months after conception, and at a newborn. Is this not odd looking to think that this child, this fetus, is all head at the beginning and then equals out by the end? There are some pregnancy problems. Sometimes women are infertile, and IVF, GIFT, and ZIFT are forms of artificial insemination. Again, I'm not going to cover them. They are in the book. If you're choosing test, it may be in the book and it may be a question. Miscarriage is also a risk factor for pregnancy. The reasons for miscarriage vary, but miscarriage in a family can cause lots of anxiety, depression, and there is grief. There is grief no matter how old that child was. An abortion is also an option for some people. There's mixed findings about the after effects. For some people, there's a grieving period. Others, it's a guilt period. But the research shows that no matter whether it was chosen for health reasons or chosen as a form of birth control, it almost always causes some kind of a psychological issue in the future. So this is just a thing about older women and how risky it is. And I think at older women, I think they said 45. So having an ectopic pregnancy, which is a pregnancy outside of the uterus, increases pretty dramatically. Miscarriage increases, and chromosomal abnormalities such as Down syndrome increase. We talked about a sensitive timeline and how as we grow and develop, we learn certain things. And this is a picture of that. The dots are associated with when the child is developing. So if there is a trauma, it will impact on those things at that time. The mother's prenatal well-being influences the child in her uterus. So her diet, her age, her prenatal support, health, drug use, tobacco use, all of those things will have an impact at the time that it's hitting. In the screen before, we showed what's developing at what time. If the mom is drinking during one of those times, she's going to influence the development of that section. Mothers who use alcohol while pregnant on a regular basis can create a child who's born with fetal alcohol syndrome. We're going to talk about that later. Or a child who has fetal alcohol effect. And we're going to talk about that later. There's very little research to show how the father has impact on the child. But there is a little bit that shows that if the dad is a smoker or does drugs or drinks alcohol, that it can have an impact on the sperm, which will have an impact on the embryo, and also that the treatment of the mother. If the father is stressing the mother out, that of course is going to cause problems. We're going to skip that one. Preterm infants can have respiratory distress syndrome. They tend to have asthma and breathing issues as they get older. Um, they tend to be low birth weight and very small. Most preemies tend to develop normally in the long run, but they develop slower. They're developing more at the rate they would be if they were born full term versus preterm. So trying to explain that. If a child is born 3 months early, they may not catch up to development in that 3 months until the age they were supposed to be born. If they were supposed to be born in December, you might start to see development in December, not the 3 months prior. So smallest survivors, 2¼ pounds, in the womb less than 30 weeks. The way to help these children is for them to receive really high quality care. Usually they're left in a hospital for a very long time. They're given a specific type of care, stimulation, massage, they're being held, and the hope is that they meet their birth weight and are able to go home. We don't know why some babies are born at low birth weight. We're not sure. Sometimes it's related to the mother's reproductive system. Sometimes it can be caused because the mother's too old, too young, maybe she just had a baby. There's lots of reasons that a low birth weight could happen. The research doesn't give a clear indication of why that is. Post-mature babies also have problems. 2 weeks or more overdue. The blood supply from the placenta is going to be inefficient. It could cause brain damage, and the baby may become so big that it cannot pass through the birth canal in a regular way, which is a whole different set of risk factors. So I just did the whole lesson today, day 2 of class. You only have to watch one video. Yay! I hope everyone is doing well, and I'll post one forum for this one. Thanks.